Today, we're going to be looking at one of the series of items that we were commenting with, and really also everything that we do is all about technology and how we move in technology, but they've got a slightly different focus and shift. Now, if you've not been with us before, the basic outline of what I try and do is to get through as much as possible, really to get you thinking. And then we have a lot of follow-on stuff through that. If you're interested in my background, I was former head teacher of an outstanding school, really proud to lead a team towards that. And obviously everything's about the team. If you're a leader, you know everything's really about your team. I've got some qualifications as well, which some people are interested in. But the thing that I think is most important is I've actually, with most of the stuff I'm going to talk about, I've been there. And so I took the plunge from being a, I literally started teaching assistant, for literacy assistant, all the way through, became a head teacher, and then I moved into the business side of education as well, where I really started to look at how we approach things from a more corporate perspective. And now we work with 450 schools, training teachers. So hopefully this here, innovative methods and tech for training, hopefully we've got something to say about that, not theoretically, not on a one-off, not on a pilot that we did, but because we have to make our money off this. This is what we do, so hopefully you're going to find some of it of use. If you haven't been with me before, please know that I try and talk a lot, so you get a lot of the delivery opportunity. It's going to be about 30 to 35 minutes. Text comments are always welcome in the chat, so please do come them through. So Brett, thank you very much for making that note there, Deborah. Really appreciated. Thanks a lot, Aaron, for noting it too. That will come through all the whole time. I'll be coming back to it. And also, there's going to be a one-to-one link. So if I say something that you think is worth discussing further, chat in more detail, I'm more than happy to do that, and that is just completely free and enjoyable, just because I really love sharing the knowledge, and it's just a form of best practice that maybe will give you an angle to what you're doing. I've done probably about 10 or 15 a week now since lockdown started through these webinars, and I genuinely really enjoy them, because it's just what we do in helping more schools. So why we know about what we know? Well, we've taught or delivered to 8,000 teachers some form of training, whether that's one-to-one days, all the way through to QTS and leadership training. And we're the first private company to be set up to support the government super training program. If you don't know about that, I'll just add the link in. Let's just go and grab the link for you, just in case you're interested. But we were one of the first places to actually managed to get the first contract. We're going to be helping 300 UK schools, because we've got a lot of international schools, but we're going to be helping 300 UK schools really develop and push our items as well, and kind of really farm out our expertise in some way, shape or form. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, this is the third of the webinar series, the Teaching Workforce with Technology. Now, before I get into it, I'd like to tell you, what kind of things we're going to cover. So there's a lot of bit about rationale. And we have to think back, if we want to make training more effective, we have to think why and what we're expecting from training in the first place. We also want to look at our roadmap for training. And we also want to look at this thing called nudging, because the way that you push people towards training or push people along training is actually more important than the training that you offer them in the first place. And I'll give you a really interesting example of this. As you probably know, a few years ago, actually it's probably a decade ago now, the government thought, well, wouldn't it be brilliant if every teacher had a master's level profession, or master's level status within what they do? And we were like, yeah, that's a great idea. The completion rate on those, even though it was given by a top university and backed by the government and paid for, was only 8%. So 92% of people who started did not finish the MA, even though it was being paid for by the government. It would have been career opportunity. And I would argue many reasons why that didn't work, but nudging was completely missing. You're expecting people to train and to self-deliver from them. So we're going to talk a little bit about nudging. We're going to talk about the marathon in training and the variety, and then we come to more about the technology afterwards. Now, there's going to be talk about video, talk about mass communication, talk about the battle and competition within training, how to set it up, and some 3D opportunities. Now, I'm not going to talk endlessly about that, and I'll show you for why. This is much more, and I think I actually mentioned it. Sorry, the last thing we'll touch upon is the nudge machine. But the reason I'm not going to talk about it loads is because in this webinar, what I'd really like to do is get you thinking about the how and the why. Now, the what, excuse my overpronunciation of the word, the what, we've kind of covered and everyone else is covering. Hey, you can use this to do this, or you can use that to do that. So just to give you an example as well, and I know it's coming up in the messages, if I come across to some of our training items and I look at, and obviously anyone who does a one-to-one will get this with us, but just to give you an idea here, if I just go to one of the areas in school roles, and yeah, understanding how to teach technology. If you join us for a one-to-one, I give you free access to this course. So it's all about embracing change. It's all about how you can use video. It's all about the assessment tools that are out there. We'll give you that because we've done that already. It's something that's really, really going to be useful for you for teaching the teachers and teaching your students, and give you a really good introduction to that. So I'm not here to talk specifically about that. I really want to talk about the how of everything, and the why, not the what. I hope that makes sense, but please put through any questions, because this is what it's really about. And what I'm going to talk about a lot is where training goes wrong. Okay, why training doesn't work, and then see how technology can add and augment and develop from the part that you are actually, wherever your starting point is. And that's one of the things that we can talk about in more detail in the one-to-one. So, without further ado, and we also have a digital leadership one, which I can share if it's relevant to learners. But here's the first thing. We'll start with offering training. Now, the biggest problem with technology training is people think that technology will take care of something. Technology can't take care of anything. If you start with bad ingredients, all your technology is useless. If you try and bring in a culture change with technology, but you didn't actually have a culture in the first place, then what are you trying to change? You're just adding more ingredients into a mess. So in seeing this, I'd really say to remember that tech is always an augmentation. In much the same way that a glove allows me to reach into maybe a hotter surface, or a hat allows me to maybe go into somewhere that's hotter, or a jacket will allow me to go in somewhere that's colder. It's really just an augmentation. Yeah, do remember that at one point a jacket was a piece of technological innovation. So it can allow you to do something quicker, faster, more connected, more trackable, blah, 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 blah. But all of that doesn't matter without purpose. So a lot of the times that we're talking to schools and seeing what they're doing, they want to do new things because they heard there's new things, but they don't actually have a course or a roadmap into what they're doing. And that comes down to a big problem. Why are we training people in the first place? And these could be, plentiful and very wide-ranging in what they do. But why are we training? Some people are doing it because there's elements there where they switched onto the idea of appraisal, and they're looking at how they can, judge people. And then the training is either a follow-on or a missed opportunity around that. Some training is very reactive. A government initiative has come out and said this, and so we want to do that. Some training is offered as like, well, if you want to be head of department and if you want to get to this level, then you could do this, that, and the other. And some training is research-based, where people build towards qualifications. But I hope even in kind of outlining the reasons that you've got it there, and this reason that you want to use technology, and the reason that you've come to this web, kind of understand some of these things, all of those are insanely different. It's really, really different when you're actually thinking about, okay, how am I using it to support appraisal? How am I using it to be reactive and reflexive? The amount of requests we had for something to do with training for equal opportunities, Black Lives Matters, and cultural awareness has just gone through the roof the last couple of weeks, for example, but people want to react to it in different ways. And counter Black Lives Matter as well. How you want to be goal-orientated and shape your training to actually help your career or to help your development or to help a certain student, again, is very, very different. And again, it's qualifications. So it's a real key thing that, to summarize, that tech doesn't matter without you knowing which of these that you want to do. And don't be surprised if your technology then has to change, your technology use or your technology mode has to change if you're doing that. So you might find that one app in need is really useful if you're looking for a qualification-based system, but something is actually going to be very, very different if you're looking for how to make the speediest reactive-based system. So you have to remember that. Training in schools for too long, and this is the majority, obviously I'm not talking about all training, is very uniform. We have a set way of doing it, set times of doing it, set responses to doing it, and really we don't think enough about the why we are training and then the how we are training to really do that. And some key items that I think are worth mentioning there are when you think about your training in terms of, a lot of it is to do with external factors. Because we need to get grades, we're going to do this. Because we're trying to get that criteria this, because the government has leased this initiative this, because the school down the road got that and are taking more students, now we're going to do this. But really, there's not really much chance and scope within what we do in training to really kind of celebrate and push a lot of the internal items. And I think if you've ever joined me in one of these before, you'll know that I'm a big believer in you pushing your own values and ethos in your training, because that's what people buy into, and the research supports that, and I'll be touching upon that later. So really thinking about this here. Whatever you do with tech, whether you spend £6 million on something or £6 on something, it doesn't matter if you're not aligned to your purpose. So always remember that whatever tech you're using is always going to be an augmentation. And obviously I'll come into stretching on some of those points shortly. Now, the next point I want to talk about here is the roadmap and the nudging. And this is one of my key phrases here, because this is what works. It works in it works with the students, it works with the staff, it works in business, it works in schools. People don't do things because they really feel like doing it and they get on with it. The people that are generally self-driven in society, any society, is around 12% of people. So you'll find 12% of people that whatever initiative you give them, they will run and do that thing. And that's the most important thing for them. For the rest of us, we have to be nudged along. And I'm definitely not in that 12%, I can tell you that. Without the right nudging and support, just a little barrier, just a little push, something to help me overcome that obstacle, something to make me feel, something to make me think, something to make me move. You have to start thinking about that in your training. And that nudge isn't an email saying, hey, have you done it yet? And that's why we talk about in e-learning 2.0, we talked a lot about gamification. And in the e-learning 3.0, we actually talked about contextualization, and we'll go on and develop further there. So a big part of what we have to do is planning what we do, but that's not the content. So the content, just imagine you have to have something, right? And now prior to your content, you want to have your purpose. So your purpose informs your content. This is the first part that you're going to train. The next thing that you actually have, you're looking at your focal points. So there's going to be a focal point. Now for you, this could be, depending on what you're doing from the last one, this could be a qualification level you want to hit. It could be a standard level you want to hit. It could be preparation for an Ofsted that's coming. It could be preparation for joining a trust. It could be for personal development. It could be around about a certain person. It's absolutely fine and up to you. What we know from the research is that we want 1, 2, 3 focal points to be delivered in different ways. So again, this is completely up to you. So after you've maybe had the training or you've actually given this first item, the first focal point might be, a summary soon afterwards, in a way or form that we'll look at the tech of it afterwards. The second one might be the instigation and the implementation of it in the classroom. The third one of it, just in a classical sense, could be a triad and mentoring. So you've got the 3 left up. Then what I'm trying to get across in trying to the plan in the first instance is you have to have several instances of how your training is going to be looked at. Okay, so when you do a one-off training, you say, good luck, everyone, get on with it. And there's no formal focus point, or there's no focus point at all afterwards. It's just a summary email or a questionnaire of how you feel it went 1 hour after doing it, or on the day. How many of you give those forms at the end of a day and just like, hey, so how was the training? And you give it, it's like, do I feel this will be good for me in the future? Yes. What are you really trying to measure? Your roadmap there is really, really incomplete, and you could argue insincere, because you're trying to instill a difference over time and make the training valid, yet you have no focal point for actually judging and measuring how that is or how it comes about. So it's really, really important to do. Now, same as the focal point, the next thing I'll mention there is the development markers. What is it you will measure to say that something's been effective? So in our focal points, they were just points that we're actually going to start marking and say, we're going to take a temperature check here or a measure here. But what goal are you trying to get to? And this is what I talked about earlier, where in one of the previous seminars, where I was really talking about coming backwards with development markers to try and think about where it's going to be useful. Now, in there as well, this is where you plan the nudges. Now, nudges can take the form of any different thing that's useful. With the technological sense, it has one meaning: how we push you to use a system, how we push you to use technology, how we push you to complete something. But within your training itself, there has to be a nudge. There has to be something worthwhile. So whether it's going to be as silly as something like there's refreshments, whether it's going to be something like, this counts as CPD hours, whether it's going to be, okay, 7 attendances to this means that you don't have to come to an inset day. There has to be those little nudges, or you might call them carrots, that end up putting them in certain ways to get people motivated along. And technology allows us to do that quite rapidly. But do think about technology. If you don't have the purpose aligned in the first place, it's going to be very difficult for you to convince anyone that anything's going to be nudged, because everyone's going to look at you and say, well, where are we going? What is the point of this training if it's not part of that roadmap? So the roadmap starts here. We start with the most classic thing that we is behavior management. We get behavior management right. After we can do behavior management, we get better lessons. After we do better lessons, we're doing growth mindset. After we're doing growth mindset, we get to some kind of nirvana. But that's generally a flow, because you remember we try and tighten first to good, and again, just to use old terminology, we tighten to good and then we loosen to outstanding. So planning your nudges and your development markers within them, really, really useful. And tech here is useful for that. If I go back one slide and I just touch upon what I said a moment ago and just clear this, in that sense, it's an augmentation. So tech can help you nudge. Tech can help you share. Tech can help you track. But if you don't know what you're trying to track in the first place, the tech is useless. So just remember that. Anything that you want to do that I mentioned on the second slide here, when you're developing your roadmap, if you don't know what you're trying to go in the first place, and only you will, it becomes useless. And the last part I want to talk about, and this is when we're looking at the roadmap, is there's some things that you're going to do and you're going to want, but never ever underestimate the things that you find out accidentally. So when you find out a different teacher's strengths, when you find out problem areas within the school, when you find out which kind of response, I don't know if you've ever heard of musical maths and the way people found out, from demonstrating, having more music teachers involved in maths and trying to make math lessons rhythmic, etc., how well it did in some underperforming schools, because there are some things that you won't know. And that's the beautiful thing about iteration within your roadmap. Be ready to change. Be ready to change. Always be ready to change. So remember those kind of concepts and those ideas. Hopefully they'll be of use. So the third thing that we get onto here is looking at the marathon and variety. And we're thinking very much in terms of a 3-year plan. Now that might make you balk in the very first instance, but the reason I think about this as a 3-year plan whenever you're trying to get something is you're trying to bring about a culture change that will last, or you're trying to bring about practices that will last. I've never seen whatever school I've worked with, I've never seen something go whole school within a term or 2 terms. Within a year, you can get really some good traction. But as school leaders, you're not thinking like, what's going to happen tomorrow? You need to think, okay, well, what happens over time? If you're thinking about reacting to what's going on with a neighbouring school, or what's going on with Ofsted, or what's going on this, that, and the other, that's more reactive, or you could argue crisis responding than actually roadmap planning. You go, we've got this 7-year vision. I don't mean that either. I mean something that you actually think, okay, within 3 years, we will have had a full cycle, something that we can embed, we can see at different layers and different departments to bring about full change around in a school, to put full implementation within the school. Then you really need to be thinking in terms of years rather than total weeks. Obviously, everything that I said with regards to technology use can be used in a half term, a term, etc. But what you really want to think about them is over the course of 2, best of all 3 years, where you think about happening. Because what you're doing there is what will happen over 3 years is it's less of a lottery. Things will be replicable, things will be scalable, things will be transferable. In year 1, or in the several half terms that you run something, you find out what's going on. And then you can get real clear evidence. So just to give a current example, if you were to look at, let's just say COVID, because obviously everyone's in this situation because of COVID. If you look at a 5-year trend, and some of you probably have already seen this, that if you look at a 5-year trend for deaths in England between March and I think it's March and April. So you look at those 2 months, a 5-year trend. So it's something like 98,000 people generally died on average, give or take. And they're very, very close and reactive. For this year, we know that it's been 147. So nearly a 50,000 person difference on the average. Now, obviously, that's not the kind of stat that we want to run around with very, very much. But the element and what I'm trying to actually say is you only know if something really works if it's been repeated. Because in just one term, one class, one space, you only know if it's really worked because of that teacher. You only know if it's worked because maybe that cohort was bright. You only know if it's worked because there was passion and energy behind it at the time. But how do you bring about long-standing change with anything that you're doing with your training? Well, you have to make sure that it's actually trackable over time. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can ultimately with. And then ultimately what you end is you're growing your own people who have the presence of mind and the iterative thinking that you want them to have so they can continue to do what you are doing. So I hope in that first word about training, I think that's going to be, relevant. It's something that's it just gets you thinking, because obviously that's the point. And just to remind you again, the reason I'm not doing, if you joined late, the reason I'm not doing the how is because we have a course. Obviously, if you do the one-to-one with me, you get that course for free, looking at different items. It's put together by EdTech experts in the field, a gentleman, a professor at the University of Liverpool called Mr. Pete Atherton, who made the course for us, just looking at all the different types of EdTech that you can use with your staff and with your students. So the actual content's already there. So hopefully that is relevant and of interest. And so what I'll ask you to do now, just as I kind of stop the first part where we talked about technology, we talked about training, why we do training, how we're running. What I always ask for in this section is just for you to give me an idea of some of the thoughts just on the first part of what I said. I'd really love to know what you guys thought about some of that, any key takeaways, something that's in your mind, something that's useful. It's the most important thing. If you've been anywhere with me before, you'll know I talk a lot about 4-stage training, which we'll come to next. But I'd just like to know if anything there was of use. So please, just in the chat, just note any key comments, key thoughts, key takeaways from anything that I said, whether it was something to do with nudging and how that's much more important actually than the training itself, having the training at the beginning. Just any thoughts. And I know I'm on a 30-second delay, so I'll just be quiet just while a few people put some items forward. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jane. Really, really appreciate that. The nudges are necessary. If you don't get people to push if you don't get people to push and look forward, if you don't get people to push forward and think about the way in which they have, I don't know, like you call it the white part of the Oreo, you can call it kind of the greasing of the wheels, you can call it any of the different times, but the nudges are really, really, really important. Thanks a lot for touching upon that, Jane. Just give them another minute for anyone to come through. Susan. Hi, Susan. Thank you. We've started to implement the bite-sized training. Yeah, brilliant. Yes, the bite. Thank you very much for putting that in. That was some of the items that I mentioned afterwards. Is that the way that you can, and we'll talk about that more in the application. So this is more the thinking, the first part. The second part is going to be the implication with that and looking at that space and time. Yeah, really, really useful for doing that. Lindsay, interesting that 12% do not need a nudge. I assumed, yes, yeah, really, really surprising too. So it's actually, it's a really interesting item. It's about a bell curve, and they're also called in another way. It's actually 15% of people are early adopters. So 15% of people will jump into smart homes or jump into 3D or jump into something, and they'll be like, yeah, we know it and try it. And that's a great barometer for the rest of the market. But in terms of people who are self-starters, motivated to get going that way, it's only 12%. And then what you find in companies like Google, Microsoft, or some of the corporates like Deloitte and stuff, you've just got more of the 12% of people in there. And then I want to say, but in certain other professions, when they do the same kind of relevant tests, they just find there's far less of those people, and the people who would have been of the 12% are actually drowned out by the pick my words carefully, drowned out by the lethargy that they might find in other organizations. I think that's fair. And also what's also interesting, especially because remember, we talk about training, and we have to be honest with each other as teachers. We talk about training as an extra. We and I say this of myself, teachers assume, because it's inherent in the nature of teaching, the autonomy that comes with teaching, teachers assume we know. And we think that the marker that we have is the grades at the end of the year, and then every 3 or 4 years, that's our kind of our marker. If you start looking at training companies, they approach it inherently, seismically different than we'd ever do in schools. What we do in schools would never wash in any self-respecting company, because it has to have, every minute of an employee's life has to have value in terms of something trackable to the bottom line or trackable to the growth and status of the company. School teaching isn't like that. So it's a real interesting, when we moved into business, we work a lot with businesses now, and obviously our software is used with businesses, companies as well. It's a complete mind shift. So it's okay for our training in schools to be average, sadly. You know, I'd argue it's not okay, and obviously you probably agree with that, that's why you're here. But generally it's okay there, and not okay in other places. Some people think a big nudge and others, yeah. Some may be a kick. Yeah, I can't, no comment, but I think we've all been there. Colleagues. So now I'm going to touch upon some of the elements now. Just to go back one, I'm a big proponent in 4-stage training. Anything that you're thinking of doing within your school, please think about it in 4 stages. The first and most important is the content delivery and the community that surrounds that. The community that surrounds your content delivery is the one that makes the most sense. One of the things that Web Training 2.0 showed us was that gamification looked like it was going to be something interesting, but what we really found is contextualization. The personalization of contextualization was more important than people didn't really want to pick their avatars and make hair big and, or my lockdown haircut and the rest. What people wanted was to know that the training was going to be relevant in their context. So is the personalization to context was more important than personalization to personhood or the idea of self. So remember how much it is important that you've got a sense of community around what you're doing. The second is always the implementation. Okay, we need to see that you are doing something with it. It's not enough to talk about it. It's not enough to think about it. We need to see how you do something with it, and then we need to refine and develop what you do with it afterwards. And you have to then make sure that any training you do has some kind of outcome, achievement, or reward aligned to it. There's something, it was worth it. So much training is done and it's like, goodbye, fill in a form and take care. You know, we even used to have trainers come to the school and, you know, they deliver sessions and, you know, they would just be imploring people to put 5 stars at the end, and people would be like, okay, well, you're a bit keen, we'll put 5 stars. It's just like, well, it was useless. And that's what started us reimagining our training, because if we don't use it, what was the point? And you just remember with your training days and training time, you put in 40 to 50 grand in when you bring the school together. Each day you bring the school together costs you 40 or 50 grand. Make sure you're getting 40 to 50 grand's worth out of it. So the next part that I want to talk about is now coming to some of the more specifics around text and the consideration with technology itself. So you're thinking about using a new piece of technology, you want to use it. The bottom rule is, and this is, again, this is much more to do with behavioral science than it is to do with, oh, I reckon. This is to do, you have to have something that's 3 times whatever it was you were before. So 3 times faster or 3 times easier to do any given thing. Now, there are areas and times where using more impressive technology can be brought in because you're really setting a higher standard bar. But anything tool you bring in for training or any tool that you bring in to actually kind of push people in that way, you have to make sure that it is allowing you to do something 3 times faster. So, Susan, just because you kindly mentioned it earlier when you said about you're taking some of the training that you're doing in your school and you're starting to chunk it, well, I would argue instantly chunking, say, like a 2-hour normal inset after school. Because remember, we also, sometimes we just stretch our training to fill a time. We're not really doing it because, like, this is the most efficient this hour could be. It's really actually, you're 4 o'clock, you're bored, I have to do this part of an hour. It's my role to be the CPD liaison. So I'm going to make it an hour or 2 hours long. And we look at those areas. If you chunk it down, I'd argue it's so much easier to kind of comprehend, and it's so much faster to gather because you're doing it at times that you want. So you can take an hour of training, put it into 15 minutes of videos, and you can chunk it down. So remember, any piece of technology that you're trying to use really goes for that. And this is really important, that speed and efficacy in training are normally linked. If I can do and understand something quickly, then I am going to be able to understand and implement it quicker. Not always a rule, but basically try and make it simple in a way that people can activate. Not everyone's joining you for a master's seminary every single training session. They want to be like, this was worth it, it was quick, I got the reward, I can come out of it. It's really, really important. And so your technology has to allow that to happen. Next item that I'd actually talk about there is when you're trying to personalize, and I touched upon about this earlier, it's really when you get people interested, and this is linking to nudging and how you use the technology, even from as important as putting your badge on something or having, and I'm a big fan of this, having your own teachers do the training rather than we bought X Model X from such and such company, which had that. It has to be really around your community need. Never, ever underestimate how important it is for people to hear about the building names that you have in your space. Never important is to hear about certain year groups or descriptors of anonymized children that people would recognize. Never be afraid to talk about the history of your school and why the training is important. That communal idea that we're grasping and everyone knows what we're talking about in the same space, you use your technology to echo and push that. So it's faster and personalized to the context that they're in. It doesn't really matter how many colors of shades of skin or hair that they can put. And this is the last thing actually, but if you can get people to buy in and commit, and this is the big fallacy of technology, anything works. And I say that, and it's actually, gives me a little bit of sadness in it, because when anything works, it really just kind of puts a mirror to us and say, well, partly we're not the problem, but we're one of the barriers to technology working because we can't get people aligned. And if I go all the way back to the beginning, one of the reasons we don't get everything aligned is because we haven't in the first instance got the picture clear. We don't know what the roadmap is. So it doesn't matter what technology we're using along the line. If the roadmap and technology happen to mix, brilliant, we're doing really, really well. But if the roadmap is all over the place, then whatever technology we throw at it, it doesn't fix it. It just runs technology. And you have to remember with technology as well, people are more interested in selling you technology than making technology personalized to you. And I say that having been a head teacher and someone obviously who now sells technology, I remember one of the things that would grate me so much is people would just tell me about the features. They're not telling me about the benefits because they know that the features can work. But if it's not in my plan, my roadmap, my schema, it's not going to work for me. I'll have no benefit. It might work, but I have no benefit. I hope that gives you a way of thinking about I would put any piece of technology that you're going to use around for teacher training through those 3 markers. Okay. Does it align to my vision? Can it give me community personalization? Is it faster? And is it easier? If it doesn't hit any of those criteria or 3 or 4 of those 4 criteria, just forget it. That's my advice. And obviously I'd stand by that. So we move on then, and I'm going to talk about the types of methods that you use technology for training now. And again, as I said before, I hope you've seen, there is a whole course on this. I'm more than happy to share it with you if you join the one-to-one, because, I look forward to it. I think they've told me today, I think there's something on the right there. You get an ebook, which is lesson planning. I wrote that, actually. I really like that book. It's sarcastic in abundance, but because I wrote it when I was still a head teacher. And then we'll make a training with you. Yeah, obviously we will. But yeah, you can read that at the top. Sorry, I just got distracted there. So one of the key things about the implementation is you're thinking about the speed within it, you're thinking about the competition angle that you'd integrate in it, and you're also thinking about the immersion opportunity. Now, immersion means how deeply interested can I be in something? And that's where you hook someone, that's where you grab someone's attention. And that is why some big showpiece pieces are useful. So if I was to, let's see, in this room. No, I bought an Oculus Rift during lockdown. I didn't try and entertain myself with anything, but when I want to wow someone, I know that I'll show them the Oculus Rift. Do you remember like when the iPhone first came out? Oh, wow. If you do one training, like a year to do with that, just to keep people guessing on their own tones, that's good as a one-off, right? You're trying to impress people. And that's where you kind of get that, wow, I really buy into this. Now, where would you do this with training? You might have some 3D videos made, for example. You might have something given out that was part of a pack where trainings had materials, and there was maybe some, either be it the cause, like if you're doing growth mindset, or whether you're doing some policy or the school, you gave out the rulers or iPad cases to staff, just be like, oh, wow, there's something here. Because a lot of people turn up to things like BET simply for the goodie bags that they'll get as well. So that immersion, that impressing on people, that, wow, this is serious, it just takes it up a level. But that's not really where you want the efficacy of technology to be used in what you're doing. The simplicity of technology coming across in terms of speed is generally where we think about when we're broadcasting stuff. So as an example, it's really about like, do you have private WhatsApp groups with different departments in school? Do you have private, an emoji sharing in the way that you actually get things across? The speed, you can use some technology for speed of communicating quickly. And obviously with the case of emojis humorously. Think about the memes that you share. Think about the way that you communicate with family during WhatsApp. Are there ways to make that work within an organizational structure to give you that same kind of speed? And obviously the answer is yes, because you have Facebook Facebook Work, where it has Messenger basically for work, and you have Slack, which allows you that communication as well. And obviously Microsoft Teams has been the first one to bring it en masse within schools, because it's got so much that's tentacled around it, but there that piece of technology is being used for speed. So think about what you can use to broadcast and share what you're doing. And that's really, really important, because so much of what we do in schools with training isn't really about best practice, it's about content delivery. Because if it was really about best practice, well then you would see me do something, or sorry, let's be fair, I have no best practice in a bone in my body. I would see you do something, and then I would try and do it. And then we would measure my doing of what you showed me, if we really were interested in best practice. But we're not. We're interested in just sharing what so-and-so did in theirs. So it's really still about content delivery, and then you can do what the hell you want with it. We don't track, we're not interested, we don't understand, we don't come that way. So if you're going to do this, well, fine, let's keep doing it, but let's broadcast a little quicker. So can we look at Slack? Can we look at WhatsApp? Can we look at text messaging services? How can we broadcast what we're doing to get that speed benefit and use the technology that way? And again, we can add different things, whether it becomes memes. I mean, do you ever think about making sarcastic trainings of your memes, or emojis of some of the things that you want to say, how you put them across? Thinking there about speed of capturing different items. The next one is going to be something that's quite important. In fact, I'm going to put a link in here so you guys can see the different items. I'm just coming away from a second. So if you, in fact, I'll share the screen and then I'll share it. But you'll see a different method of it. I've got the word here, battle. And this has become much more explicit, because we always know that competition, I'm putting it into the chat as well, colleagues, but I'm just going to go to it here. Here's one that's, again, it's not necessarily super relevant with regards to all the ideas of work, because there's so many different things, but this is a group called Corp Academy. It's become very, very big at the moment. And what they do is they do personalized learning, but one of the most important things about it is that it's a battle experience. And what I mean by a battle experience is, there you go, you rank against your colleagues. So again, just I've signed up to it, I've used it, but I used the demo just to see what they were doing. But again, it's just that battle and that competition. So essentially, it's not just about you completing something because you have to complete it. It's you completing it so you can do it better, faster, quicker than someone else. And I know that's a kind of way that we tied into it, but can the technology you use allow you to do that? Can the technology you use allow you to change the way that you are delivering and actually sharing some of your items so that people are competing with it? Now, in top schools that we've worked with, and I mean, the ones where you have to pay 30, 40 grand a year to go to, that has always worked the best. These places have been outstanding in whatever judgment they are for God knows how long. And the only thing that allows us to get anywhere in terms of put the technology in and getting technology, using it, people to improve, is the implicit and explicit competition. Someone using something new, and that's starting a fire and a carousel around people doing it. So think about the technology that you have that will allow you to do that. Who can answer the quickest? Much the same way you do with the students. And sometimes if you're thinking about how you're training and getting people involved or getting people excited, how you nudge them, that is a fantastic nudge to get them to think about that way. So yeah, those are those 3 items when we think about, okay, again, in terms of our technologies, and I hope it makes clear, or it's added to within that what I talked about first. This is all tying together. 3 times faster, 3 times easier, or more impressive. And you notice that some of the items here that we touched upon, again, so one, we're going to broadcast faster, and then we're actually going to be sharing things so they're actually more relevant to people, and it's easier to do it because I know I'm competing against someone, or are we in that area and stage that we want to impress? And that's all really, really important. The last thing I want to show you now is a kind of what we built in the way that we do what we do, and encouraging you to train in a certain way that is essentially a nudge machine. Now, to do this, I'm only going to show you just 2-3 minutes of the way we built a system after making 1,000 mistakes to push people along that nudge. And what we found is, and obviously, as you already said about the 12%, most people want the thing to come to them. And that's, I don't know if you read some of the research coming out of Singapore that people, I've got a book here. So if I take the book in Singapore, they're finding that kids are now struggling to read from one side of a page to the other. Forget whatever book it was, they're all reading, they're struggling to get from there to there because they are so used to adverts jumping up, popping up, interrupting them, at purchase this, sideline that. So it's become to concentrate even on a line. And we find that generally with people's memories, people's memories are getting worse. Miller's magic number, which was put forward in the 70s, purported that people could actually remember 5 to 7 chunks of things. Our generation is down to 3 to 5 chunks of things. And obviously that's quite a common trope. I don't need to go into that too much. The point that it has with regard to training and learning is what it means is people don't want to go out and do and grab stuff anymore. People need stuff to come to them. So the nudge machine that we built is what I'm going to show you now and just give you an idea of some of the ideas that are within them. So within the areas that I'm going to cover, the first and the most important I'm always a big fan of is video. Use video because it allows you to get the message right in the time you want to get it right. The second element that we're going to be looking at is the pathway. You have to make a pathway. It's kind of part of your roadmap, how you're going to nudge people and move people along. And then the last one is having things dated. It has to be personalized so I know what days I'm doing it and how much I'm doing. And then obviously we're going to look at where we assess people because the old way of doing things, we just don't need to do anymore. In a post-COVID world, we don't need to do it. And I say this, and we've never, thankfully, lost a customer. And we have like a 95.5% completion rate on all our courses. Obviously, there's things that you can't help, where there's illness and the rest of it. But there's so much that is completely and utterly nudgeable to get people to complete stuff, even the people who don't want to. And I'm going to demonstrate some of that now with the piece technology. Now, the technology I'm going to show you, we use to work with a lot of schools, but everything that I'm going to show you can be completely bespoke to your school, your system, your needs. And that's the most important thing. I hated being ahead and not being in control. I loved, so much so that, I don't know if you mentioned this before, I don't think I mentioned it today, we basically built our own Sims because I wasn't going to pay tens of thousands of pounds for Sims to do what they were going to do. And that's where this kind of comes from. It's about making it really easy for teachers and head teachers to deliver the training that they need and nudge their colleagues and staff in a way that's meaningful. So the essence of what we do then is we train teachers in a lot of different things. If I come in here, I'm just going to go to part of our system to see we have a lot of, and it's amazing, isn't it? I've managed to forget my own website address. So we have a lot of different items, but what's important is to show you the nudges. So as a teacher, I come into something and I've got loads of different courses, all well and good. So I'm going to go to something that we all know, which is the QTS, the AO. Now within that, obviously, I've got all the different elements, nothing impressive so far. And I'm going to move into setting high expectations for pupils. And I have these videos. Rather than going into X amount of finding X, Y, Z, I can cover that whole thing, as you can see here, in 6 minutes. Okay? So again, this just shows videos, nice and quickly, summarized. It's an engaging animation, no problems there. Where it becomes a little more clever is within them, instead of asking people to go miles away to find their assessment point, you see that we put the assessment points in another way of nudging by putting a dot to come up in the middle of the video. So when I get to this point in the video, you'll see that the question for me will pop up.
This will show consistency.
Just letting it play so you can see that.
Thank you.
And then there we go, boom. A question comes up, explain my evidence choice, and obviously that's relevant to QTS where I do blah, 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 blah. But here you see I can put in my answer. More importantly, though, and again, remember I talked about community, and this is one of the things that we found made the biggest difference. If I was just to come away from where we put our answer and just to show you an example of what we see of people's answers, if I go into another item here, I'll go into this introduction to safeguarding, not the most riveting topic in the world, obviously, but again, an animation, a question in the middle. So we've got one part of nudging, two parts of nudging. And when we get to this section here, what you see, I can see other colleagues' answers. And that again is part of the nudging of getting people to actually complete training with technology, because it replicates the face-to-face experience. Technology isn't about leaving where you are. Technology is about pushing people and nudging them. But anyway, we'll go to another nudge point. Let's say now that I have a member of staff who I want to complete a mentoring and coaching course. So I'll take them to mentoring and coaching. And what I will do is I'll say, right, I need you to do the introduction, preparing for a role, and establishing a relationship. That's going to be the items that I want you to do in the first 3 weeks. So I'm going to call this, so obviously with a Thursday group, obviously Thursday, 4 p.m, half term 1. Let's imagine I was giving you all that training. And I'm going to say, I want you to do it on Monday, I want you to do it on Thursday, and I want you to do it on Sunday. And I'm going to give you a specific date from today. Let's say, where will we go? So today's the 24th. So we're going to go across, I'm going to say that's going to be 2 weeks. I'm going to give you to the 8th. And I'm going to create that schedule. And then what happens, obviously I can pick the staff member that it's for, but what you'll see is it's spread out the training over those days. So you see here, I've got it on the Wednesday, the Sunday, and the Monday, like I picked, over that period of time. So when I go to those days, again, that little nudge, because you remember the video now, when I get to that day, the video then also has the nudge of the red dot. And then the red dot also has the nudge of other people's answers. So it's that machine, keep pushing, pushing, pushing. And that's all I wanted to show you, give you an idea of some of the technology, or the way we use technology to push people throughout and towards different end goals with their training, to keep them on track with where we are. And the reason I think that's really, well, sorry, that's not the reason I think it's important. That's just not, that's really disingenuous. The reason it has worked is because we keep looking for those little nudges. So as much as we talk about training, and we might pay £55,000 for XYZ person to come and talk, and we do this, that, and the other, I'm telling you, so much so that if you're using the technology to nudge people along, whichever might be, if your goal is speed, or goal is this, or goal is that, it's the nudging that makes a huge difference. It's the nudging that allows people to feel like they can complete. It's the nudging that allows people to do the micro satisfaction that they need to end up in a situation where they continue training. And that, when you've got a model like that, it's fast, it's effective, it's spreadable, it's shareable, and it's what allows you to do that. Now, the last thing I'll come to again, because obviously I'm a big advert, I've made a career out of video teaching, video training, so I think it's really, really important. Never, ever, ever underestimate the power and speed of video in what you do, whether it's video observation and then allowing staff to prove things, all right? The onus is on staff to prove that training was useful, not on you to make training irresistible. Remember that. The onus should be on staff to show, hey, I've used this bonus that you've given me to show that I can do X, Y, Z. But of course, if you're only using training, go back to the beginning. If you're only choosing training for appraisal, just go back to that slide in case we forgot about it. If you are only using technology to get, oh wow, it's a lot further back than I thought. Sorry about that, colleagues. That is going to be, but I've started, so I'll finish. If I go all the way back to where I was talking about here, yes, tech without a purpose doesn't matter. If you're using it for something like appraisal from the very off, it's going to be very, very hard for you to get into a situation where they feel like, yeah, I want to show you what I did with this, because essentially you're saying, you better show me what you did with this. And obviously that's not comfortable for the person in mind. It's not really something where they want to be and what they want to be focusing on. So the element there is really to think about allowing them to show to you and getting that culture going. Because without that, whatever technology you use, again, is going to be limited, because it's in a corrupt environment that way. Using video also allows you, for whatever training you're given, it allows them to reflect. It allows them to think about what they're doing, to show how they developed. And we've got some really, really nice items. I think, Sam, actually, if you're there, if you share some of the learners and leaders feedback video, I know you have a link, hopefully you'll have a link somewhere. If you share that with people, just to give them an idea of what it is and just show them the benefits and how they actually have their quest of actually going. And it also allows video to say that they can actually do what they say they're going to do rather than just talking about it. And that's what teachers are very, very good at. Talking about stuff, not necessarily pinpointing what they're doing with it. Some are really good, but I think as a whole, we are naturally very good at talking. We have to be. We are good communicators generally. You wouldn't expect a teacher not to be able to communicate, but what we really want to do is we want to see more and more teachers taking pride in what they can execute rather than what they can write about. But again, that's just an element there. So again, thank you very much, colleagues. That is the end of my time with you. I'd just like to know any key takeaways, anything you thought, anything that was relevant, whether it be something along the lines of the three elements, 3 times faster, 3 times easier, whether you're thinking about whether I'm using technology to broadcast, whether I'm using technology to appraise, how am I using my training in the first place and what it's slimed into, maybe some of the items that I had from the nudge machine that I believe we built in terms of pushing things forward. And please do remember that if you sign up, if you sign up for any of the one-to-ones, it'd be really free to share the course with you as well, which should just be a video course, obviously on the system where you just get to kind of run through one of the courses, see how it works, and obviously share that benefit of technology and digital leadership as well. So hopefully that's going to be of use. I'm going to come back to the chat now to see who's in and around with the bits and bobs. So David, yep, very welcome, David. Thank you very much for joining. Hope it was of use. Yeah, please do feel free to book a one-to-one if you want. Really nice to have you guys here. Hope it was use. Hope you got you something thinking. And yeah, just really looking forward to continuing with you guys in any way, shape or form in a one-to-one or in questions. So please do drop any comments. Just think about any kind of key takeaways you had, and then we can go from there. Thank you. Thanks for your help, Sammy. Oh, thanks, Deb. Yeah, teachers taking responsibility, Deb, and the pride in that. You know, they want to show what they're doing. You know, I think a lot of teachers actually end up making resources because they love making beautiful things. Do you know what I mean? They really put it that way. Ellen, really appreciate you coming and joining us. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Hope it was useful. My absolute pleasure, Aaron. Really look forward to connecting with you guys in a one-to-one if it's of any relevance. And yeah, I would also say that most of my career before I went into my own thing and we started working with a lot more private schools was always in inner city schools that for one reason or another people hadn't really had much hope in. So everything that we did worked, and it worked even before technology was a big thing. It's all about it can work anywhere. It's not just about like, well, if we had the money and if we had 91 iPads. Technology can be WhatsApp. The best piece of technology that we did in one of the most difficult schools I challenged with was everyone using an iPhone and agreeing that Apple time was the time for the school. I know that sounds so silly, but you know where behavior flashes can happen around the corridor in instances is if we all agreed what 3 o'clock meant, or if we all agreed what 1:55 meant, or we all agreed what 12:15 meant, that actually stopped a lot of problems. So it's a weird small technological solution, but it made a difference. And then obviously it goes all the way to the other end of the extremes where we're using CCTV to do video recordings and making our own Sims, or Sims equivalent via Google Docs to do that. So it's not about like, how much money do you have? Technology is really all about the implementation of it. And obviously our goal was to keep our staff safe. Thank you very much, Lindsay. Yeah, great. I hope it has the same tone as me, the book, Lindsay. It's a little bit sarcastic, a little bit irreverent, but hopefully it has some good information in it as well. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much, John. Really glad that it triggered some ideas. That's the point. The what we can give you all day long in video courses. And this is the part to just think like a little bit of bounce, a little bit of ideas, and also hopefully just get you looking at things in a different way. Really appreciate it. Well, thank you all so much for joining. Hope to see some of you again. And yeah, in the future, actually, we're going to be doing one with a magician. So a live magician. I know this sounds weird, but bear with me. A magician is going to be doing live magic tricks online, who is going to be doing that. And then I'm going to be talking a lot about capturing the magic in your school via video. So it's going to be a little interplay, something a little bit different. And yeah, also it's a bit of a break for teachers and senior leaders who are checking in and getting so many different webinars on different things. So look out for that one. We will send it to you all as well. It's going to be, a magic show, a free magic show for people who've signed up. So we really look forward to having you on that one as well. Have a lovely evening all, and really look forward to connecting with some of you again. All the best.